and welcome back to the I Don't See the Point podcast with me, Kat, and Hermione. And we are on a mission to help you see the point of ballet. So this week we've got a lot on the agenda. We've both been to see Woolf Works in the past week, 2 weeks. Since it opened? Week, yeah.
Well, just 2 weeks.
Yes. And we've seen different casts. We have a lot of thoughts, a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions. Just a quick warning for this episode, we will be discussing themes of mental health and suicide. So if that's particularly triggering for anybody, we would suggest maybe not listening to this episode. When did you see it and who did you see, Hermione?
I saw it last Friday, which is why I was like, oh, it was just 2 weeks. And I saw the stunning, the amazing, the magnificent Natalia Rosipova in the main Mrs. Dalloway, Virginia Woolf role. Don't worry, we'll explain this in a second.
We will go into it.
And that was her debut in the role. I've seen her in different roles in the ballet before, but it's a role for a more mature dancer. And so she's sort of grown into it. And it was very exciting to see her debut.
And in the sort of male main part?
It was Rhys Clark, who's always paired with Natalia.
Recently always paired with her.
Yes.
And then I saw Marianela Nunes as the main role and Matthew Ball alongside her.
Mwah! Matthew Ball.
Wonderful. Oh, and I saw that. It's worth saying, I saw the performance that was the whole house reserved for young ROH members, the 16 to 25 tickets, £25 tickets. And the atmosphere was really, really cool. Like, a lot of young people. I have to say, it did feel like we were all on a school trip and that we should be supervised. It was quite strange. I sort of looked around and I was like, where are the adults? I feel like we should be watched. But yeah, it was really, really cool. And the audience was really enthusiastic about the whole thing, which was really awesome.
I'm quite jealous because, yeah, there was definitely a lot of, like, more well-aged people around me. I actually had nice seats for once. I normally sit, like, in the amphitheatre where there's more young people, but this time I was in the orchestra stalls.
I was in the orchestra stalls.
Yeah, because a family friend got me the ticket. Very nice of him.
It was really... I always feel so lucky when I'm in the orchestra stalls to see the dancers' faces.
Exactly.
Which I love. You get to see their expressions so much more.
But tragically, for when we talk about the performance in a bit, I was wearing the wrong contacts when I saw...
Were you actually?
Yeah. So I
Everything was blurry.
Well, no, it wasn't blurry, but I was sat there thinking, oh my god, like, has my eyesight got worse? Because Natalia's face is slightly blurry. And I was like, I know, it was so sad. I had both my right, this is not important, but my right eye's worse than my left eye, and I had both my right eye ones in.
Oh my god,
so it wasn't correcting my left eye enough. And I was like, squinting at Natalia, like,
I can't see. Yeah.
So
oh no,
really
that's
sad.
really annoying. So yeah, let's talk a bit about what Woolf Works is as a ballet and why we like it.
Woolf Works is really recent, so this is kind of a change from our previous discussion of Sleeping Beauty. Woolf Works was choreographed in 2015 by Wayne McGregor, who is the resident choreographer at the Royal Ballet, and he has such a distinctive style. He normally does short pieces. Woolf Works is one of the only long ones he's done. It's 3 acts, and it's based, as you can probably tell from the name, that's Wolf with 2 O's. It's based around the life and works of Virginia Woolf.
So they've all got certain names. So the first act, which is based on Mrs. Dalloway, is called I Now, I Then. The second act is based on Orlando and it's called Becomings. And then the third one, based on the waves / more of the life of Virginia Woolf, is called Tuesday.
Just a quick background piece on Virginia Woolf, icon that she is. She's a writer from the early 20th century, wrote kind of weird and interesting novels, famously a little bit gay, which we love. She had a long-term relationship with Vita Sackville-West.
She was part of the Bloomsbury group.
It was a sort of glamorous literary circle of fairly well-off, young-ish English writers.
Yeah.
The other people were
Ian Forster, John Maynard Keynes,
and Lytton Tracy.
Yeah.
And it was like a sort of avant-garde, like fairly gay group of people that she was part of. And then very, very tragically, in the early 1940s, she famously did kill herself, which has been much written about and thought about, and go listen to Florence and the Machine's song about it.
I think especially something worth mentioning about Virginia Woolf is a sort of icon in feminist writing as well.
Yes.
Like, her themes in a lot of her books touch on some pretty advanced for the time feminist theories and things like that. I think a question that a lot of people will have is, do you need to have read any Virginia Woolf at all, or any of the books, to see this ballet and understand this ballet? In short, I think the answer is absolutely not. You don't need to have read it to enjoy it. I can't speak.
No, I don't think that you need to have read the books. In fact, I think it's almost like a handicap to have read, or at least read recently, Mrs. Dalloway, Orlando and the Waves, just because I think you can almost waste time searching for plot and character in the performance when it's more vibes based.
Oh yeah.
I feel like what Wayne McGregor did was he sort of took like the energy from each book and worked with that, rather than like, and now this exact scene is translated. It's not really an adaptation. It's like an inspiration.
It's definitely more about the feeling of each book, which I really like, actually.
Me too. And I actually think, not to like go all literature student on this, but I do think it's almost in keeping with like the whimsical nature of Woolf's writing.
Totally, yeah.
It's like
very stream of consciousness.
Yeah, exactly.
I think if you are interested in the plot side of it a bit more, we will go into what happens exactly in the ballet. But Mrs. Dalloway is very, very short. I really like Mrs. Dalloway. It's one of my favourite books, actually. It's a great book to read in the summer because it takes place on one day in June. If you are more interested in it, either reading the book really quickly or just going on, I don't know, Spark Notes or something and getting a quick overview of the plot can be a bit helpful.
I've not read it in like 13 years, so I don't remember it.
My God, how old were you when you read that?
10 or 11.
10?
Yeah.
You were 10 when you read Virginia Woolf?
It was the first one I read.
That's insane.
I'm not sure I understood it that well.
I read To the Lighthouse as the first one I read.
Oh God, no wonder you were lost.
Yeah, it was
I've not
insane.
read To the Lighthouse.
I remember someone said, I was reading it because someone else read it, and I went to her and I was like, I can't really follow the plot. And she said, what plot?
Well, that's true.
There is no plot.
Have you read Orlando?
I read Orlando, yeah.
Yeah, so we've both read Mrs. Dalloway and Orlando, but not The Waves.
I'm reading The Waves at the moment. I would say, actually, Orlando is the easiest Woolf to follow.
It is, because it actually does kind of follow a trajectory. It's also my favourite.
Orlando, there is actually an audiobook recording of it on BBC Sounds, and that's how I read it, because for me it was a bit more helpful to listen to the book rather than read it, because I struggled with Woolf in the past. So
I like that.
Yeah. The Waves is her most stream of consciousness book, I think.
Yeah, it's got like,
that's recognised.
Was it 6 or 7 different points of view? And it switches
yeah,
between them without telling you when it switches. My father likes it, which just tells you
I am
everything you need
liking
to
it
know.
a lot at the moment, actually. So in the ballet of Mrs. Dalloway, I Now, I Then, it follows the main dancer, who for me was Marilena Nunes, for you was Natalia Osipova, who plays Clarissa, who is the main character in Mrs. Dalloway. And this ballet is really about her reminiscing about her youth and the people in her youth. The actual book is about her throwing a party, basically, and she walks around London and she thinks a lot about a lot of things and about her life and what her life is and how she's got to where she is now.
God, I really should reread it.
Who she is as a person. And from the ballet, what you really get is her relationships with the people in her life when she was younger. So she had this one particular friend who I think is called Sally. You can definitely recognise Sally in the ballet because she has golden hair. So she's very recognisable. I saw Megan Grace Hinkis as Sally, which was really exciting because she's recently been injured. So this was her return to the stage.
Oh, she was great in Orlando.
She's so wonderful. I saw her in Orlando as well.
Oh,
she's really wonderful. I love her. The main characters in Mrs. Dalloway are, like I said, Clarissa, and then there are the childhood version. There's the childhood version of Clarissa, so young Clarissa. There's Sally, and then there's also Peter, who is the male dancer. I think it's a principal in this.
Yeah.
And that for me was Matthew Ball. And he is really Clarissa's sort of childhood sweetheart. And their sort of relationship is very, very much reminiscing and...
It's really tender. There's a lot of really sort of like childlike, tender choreography. I think Natalia did this especially so well. Like, there's
she's
a bit where
very
she
good at
like
that.
jumps on his back and like clings to him, and like it's very like sweet to watch, but it's like bittersweet because it's the older female character remembering being young.
Because they didn't end up together. She's married to a different man who in the book she loves very dearly, but it's not sort of that passion, I think.
Yeah. Another theme that runs through Clarissa's sort of looking back on her youth is her relationship with her sort of close friend, Sally. And I know this is personally nice for me. It leads to like some very cute queer moments. Like, there's a bit where her and her friend kiss. Given that in general, especially later on in the ballet, it does more focus on her relationship with her husband, Leonard Woolf. I think it was nice for me, like, as a queer person, to see some acknowledgement of Woolf's sexuality.
The other main storyline that runs through Mrs. Dalloway follows the character of Septimus and his wife Rezia. And Septimus is a soldier who's recently returned from the war, World War One, and he is suffering from PTSD and a lot of mental health struggles. And in the book, it's not, explained like that because that wasn't really known at the time. Virginia Woolf was writing Mrs. Dalloway in the 1920s, and there was a little bit more awareness of PTSD, but it wasn't,
There was like an awareness of shell shock.
Exactly.
A thing that was kind of PTSD, but they didn't really know how to treat it, and there was so much stigma around it.
Exactly. And something that Septimus is experiencing is reminiscing of his relationship with another character, Evans, who was a soldier who I think was killed in the war. And that's also a queer relationship. And for me, this is one of the best moments of the ballet. There is a dance between Septimus, his wife Rezia, and Evans. And it just sort of goes through this dynamic of the three. And it's really, really emotional and really touching. Just one of the most beautiful moments in all of ballet, personally. In all of the ballets in Woolf Works, there are very explicit themes of suicide and mental health, and Septimus does commit suicide in Mrs. Dalloway, and when I was reading the book, I just found that incredibly emotional. And for me, actually, if we're thinking about this question of do you need to have read the books to enjoy the ballet, I actually think that I saw the ballet first without ever having read Virginia Woolf. The ballet actually elevated my reading of the book because I'd already experienced the emotion and the feeling of the book. And actually, when I read, I'm really looking for the feeling rather than... I often find that I don't really know what's going on in a book. That sounds really weird, but I don't
think
follow
everyone
the plot.
doesn't know what's going on in Mrs. Dalloway, to be fair.
Well, yeah, but I often find it hard to sort of follow the plot, but having sort of experienced the feeling and then coming to the book with that, it really elevated my reading of the book.
Orlando. There's no plot to it.
Yeah, there's no plot to Orlando. Do you want to explain overall what happens in the book very briefly? Because there's actually, for Virginia Woolf, remarkably a lot of plot.
Yeah.
It's a very long book.
Orlando
actually.
is, in fact, one of the only Virginia Woolf books with a lot of plot. So Orlando is based around the life of Orlando, who is initially, at least, a Elizabethan gentleman. He's got a beautiful country house. He has lovely dogs. You can see what's stuck in my mind from when I was 17. I did my A-level coursework on Orlando. And it follows his mysteriously immortal and gender fluid life all the way up until the 1920s. Midway through the book, he pretty much out of nowhere, with no sort of overt supernatural or natural help, becomes female, doesn't change her name. There's a lot of sort of queerified relationships in it. There's this ongoing relationship with this one particular girl that sort of stretches across both genders in the main character's life. So it's a iconically queer novel.
It's really fantastic.
It's really brilliant.
None of that really translates into the ballet.
Yeah.
The only thing that does is other themes, I would say.
I think the
gender-bending themes and the time travel.
Yeah, and
time travel, time...
The Elizabethan theme slightly is held out in the costumes. There's some, like, nods to sort of ruffs and stuff in the costuming, but there's no sense of the overarching plot, which is a very interesting take, actually, from Wayne McGregor, to take Woolf's most plotful novel and make it the least plotful of the three ballets.
I agree. I think it's almost perhaps because there's so much plot.
Yeah, I think it would be very hard to translate into one sort of 35-minute segment.
I think it can be kind of hard in this ballet to think about what dancer you should be focusing on, because there are so many, and none of them are named in the cast sheet.
And they're all, like, really good dancers. I mean, they're all normally, like, principal or the level just below first soloist.
I'd say that there's usually one main character, and this isn't sort of brought out in the cast sheet, but for both of us, I think this was Melissa Hamilton.
It was indeed.
And this would be the person that is wearing the doublet and breeches and ruff in gold. I really enjoyed the costume progression throughout this ballet. This character loses sort of various aspects of their costume, I think, to represent the changing gender of Orlando. Melissa Hamilton is a dancer that Wayne McGregor absolutely loves, because
she works really well with
so
him.
Flexible and so insanely dynamic. It's beautiful. I'd say that's really a dancer to focus on if you're trying to sort of anchor yourself to one person to sort of follow what's happening a bit more. The Waves is possibly the most emotionally charged act of the three ballets. It's about Virginia Woolf's suicide. At the start of The Waves, there's a recording of her suicide note, which is read out by Gillian Anderson, actually.
It's read out by Gillian Anderson. It's so good.
It's beautifully read.
Not to get my pro Gillian Anderson agenda into this podcast, but we love Gillian Anderson.
Oh, we do.
So much. But it's very emotional because, of course, it's someone's actual suicide note, and you know, a lot of work and analysis and, you know, handwriting analysis and stuff has been done on Virginia Woolf's suicide note.
And then it sort of is about her relationship with her husband,
who the note is addressed to.
Yeah, Leonard Woolf. And it's called Tuesday because the note is dated to Tuesday. It does also follow the plot of the book a bit, in that the book follows the lives of 6 or 7 characters, at least 3 girls and 3 boys, and sort of with others weaved in and out, and their progression through life. So it starts in their childhood, and I'm only a bit through the book at the moment, but it follows them as they're growing up. And there are some, I think, dancers from the Royal Ballet School from White Lodge, possibly, that are in this ballet, and they are really, really wonderful. And then older dancers sort of take their place, and there is a bit of that in the ballet too, but there's no plot, I don't think. There are some specific roles in this ballet that were written for certain dancers. So the role of Clarissa / Virginia Woolf originally was choreographed for a dancer called Alessandra Ferri, who at the time of the ballet being choreographed was already 51,
yeah,
which, for a frame of reference here, dancers usually retire in their early 40s, and so the fact that she was still dancing was pretty remarkable.
And she was a stunning dancer.
She was. And Wayne McGregor choreographed the role, for her in the sense that there weren't really any jumps because she couldn't really do that anymore, and it was very much for her style of dancing and her physicality at the time. And remarkably, Alessandra Ferri is still dancing this. She's 59 at the moment.
Kat's going to see her do it later on.
Yeah, which will be pretty incredible. I'm really excited for that.
The role of Septimus that we were talking about before was originally choreographed for Edward Watson, who is a really prolific dancer of the sort of last 20 years at the Royal Ballet. He sadly retired in the last year, and last couple of years. He is just completely unique as a dancer. His flexibility, his movement, he's very powerful physically, and he doesn't really fit into a classical box. I mean, he actually didn't do a lot of classical roles while a principal at the Royal Ballet, but having Wayne McGregor come in as the resident choreographer, I think he really understood that there was so much you could do with the way that Ed Watson dances.
Yeah.
I saw Ed Watson do that role 6 years ago. It made me really miss him. I mean, not to say anything against anyone else, but I do really miss him. He's a fantastic dancer.
That role is very much him, and I had that distinct feeling when I saw it as well. I saw Calvin Richardson in that
Who's
role,
great. I love
who was
Calvin
fantastic.
Richardson.
Who ironically was actually originally the soldier, the role of Evans, I think. I'm going to add a link to a recording of this particular section of the ballet because I think it's a great one. It's just really one of my favourite parts of any ballet.
She loves it.
And I've seen Ed Watson do it twice, not in the ballet, but in gala settings. And it really, seeing someone else do it, you could see so much of him in that. But I think Calvin Richardson really did incredibly well in that. He was so expressive as Septimus. So, Hermione, what were your thoughts overall about Woolf Works this time round?
Both Kat and I have seen this ballet before, even though it is fairly recent. Kat saw the original run in 2015, and then I sadly missed that, but I did see it in 2017. And I think there's something about going to the ballet over a long period of time and how you sort of change as a person, and it changes how you see performances. So I definitely feel differently about this ballet than I did as a 17-year-old. I think I held it to a lot higher standards when I was younger. I definitely did not like Orlando when I was younger. This time round, I think I got a lot more of the point and the emotion and the sort of verve of Orlando, even though the music for me is still very atonal and there's still elements that can like miss me a little bit. I do think I get it a lot more now. Mrs. Dalloway will always be a favourite for me. The music is, and it was so fantastic to see Natalia debut in this role and, you know, seeing her continue to grow as a dancer. It's actually a ballet that's really grown on me. I think I've seen more of what Wayne McGregor was doing this time round than before.
That's really interesting. Oh, I forgot to mention Marinella. This was actually her debut.
Yes.
In the role as well.
Yes, it was. 2 debuts for both of us. What did you think?
Oh, I absolutely loved it. So when I first saw it, I, to be honest, hadn't really even heard of Virginia Woolf, had certainly not read any of her books. This time round, I've read Mrs. Dalloway and Orlando, and I'm currently reading The Waves going on, especially in Mrs. Dalloway. It's funny, though, because I remember when I first saw it, I remember not knowing what was going on, but really being struck by how unique and exciting it was to see sort of a pas de deux between 2 men and 2 women.
Yeah.
Like, I really loved that.
And there's so much you can do with that choreographically.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many interesting things.
So I was just holding in my tears for Mrs. Dalloway, to be honest. It's so touching. And then for Orlando, I liked it a lot more than when I'd seen it the first time. I really, really like the music at times, and I don't like the music at others. Like you said, it's quite atonal, quite almost computery in a way. It was really, really interesting to see this ballet as part of an audience of young people, because the response to Orlando was just insane. People absolutely loved it. There were cheers as soon as the curtain dropped. When I was younger, I was in a play and my parents came to see it, and then they came out and I could see by their faces immediately that they didn't really like it. And then my mum came over and she was kind of like, the lighting was excellent. So it's a bit of a meme in my family that when someone says the lighting is excellent, it's a bad thing. But truly, in Orlando, the lighting was excellent.
It was.
Genuinely, it's wonderful. I think, Hermione, you've got some really strong thoughts on this.
There's a lot of play with the lighting. There's a lot of, like, I don't know how to say it other than, like, lasers on the stage.
Yeah, lasers.
Which kind of mess with your depth perception and where you think the dancers are on stage, which is really cool, and kind of fits with the time travel theme. One of the other things they do is they like shine rainbow beams of light onto the auditorium in the Royal Opera House. Rainbows can be overrated, but as a gay person, I'm not gonna complain about seeing the Royal Opera House of all places lit up with a rainbow laser.
If I was holding my tears in for Mrs. Dalloway, I was certainly holding them in for The Waves. It's incredibly emotional. It's incredibly raw. I think Hermione has certainly questioned the appropriateness of reading a suicide note out to audiences. And it's an interesting question. I think the fact that it is slightly inappropriate and slightly taboo is something that is a good thing. It's the only way to sort of convey this feeling, the sort of horror of reading a suicide note out, is to have it be slightly inappropriate. And I certainly, for young people, the themes in this ballet really resonate, the mental health and sort of suicide themes. The fact that it is slightly uncomfortable is quite an important thing, I feel, almost. The fact to sort of get that feeling across. and it leaves you feeling quite strange, actually, this ballet.
Which, I mean, what is the point of going to any performance art, you know, theatre, ballet, whatever, without being made to sort of question?
Yeah. One of the strongest elements of this ballet is the music, and the music is composed by Max Richter, who has composed in the past for film and television, but something that he's particularly famous for is having done the recomposition of Vivaldi's Four Seasons, which I will also put a link to in the show notes. I will put a link to the album of Woolf Works there too. I highly encourage anybody just to listen to it in isolation of the ballet. It's
Listen
truly
to
wonderful.
In the Garden. Me and my dad are obsessed.
I listen to that a lot. It's on my sort of film playlist.
Yeah, it's on my reading playlist.
The music totally brings across the feeling of the ballet, and it's perfect for sort of every single section.
Matthew Ball.
Matthew Ball.
Matthew Ball. This is the section where we're going to talk about a dancer that we admire for their artistic acumen.
That we admire greatly.
Mm-hmm.
And that dancer today is Matthew Ball.
He's a young British dancer whose career we've pretty much followed since he was first artist solo, so in the lower sort of rankings.
He joined the company when he was in 2013, was promoted to first artist in 2015, soloist in 2016, first soloist in 2017, and principal in 2018.
So I have followed him since he was a first artist.
We should just stress this is incredibly rare.
That's really fast
That's
progression.
insane progression through the company.
It was really quick. He went to the Royal Ballet School, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, he did.
And he's from up north.
He's from Liverpool.
He's really been one where I think, well, clearly, I mean, the Royal Ballet has picked him out as being great from the beginning, but like it's every bit of his success is deserved. I mean,
totally.
You could pick him out of a crowd.
He is just a dancer who I think will become iconic in our memory alongside the likes of Nureyev and Baryshnikov.
Actually, to the point on British Ballet, when he started getting really good, it was around the point when a lot of the other British dancers in the company suddenly started to sort of rise through the ranks.
Ballet is very international, and you know the top artists will go wherever in the world. You know, Marinela Nunes is from Argentina,
Natalia is Russian.
Marcelo Sambe is Portuguese. So, you know, there are a lot of international dancers in the company, but it's just especially touching for us to see British dancers doing really well. Mm-hmm. It's worth mentioning his specific strengths. He is an incredible jumper. Not a sweater, a jumper. No, I mean, his jumps are really incredible.
He really hangs in the air.
Yeah. There's something that we talk about in ballet called hang time. And what we mean by this is the amount of time that a dancer, typically a male dancer, because they're usually more powerful in their jumps.
And they normally have more jumping to do.
The amount of time that they spend in the air. And typically that's a good hang time is about 3 seconds, which if you count out 3 seconds is really, really long.
Really long to be in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Matthew Ball has incredible hang time.
Famously, apparently, Nijinsky, who's like this early 20th century dancer that no one ever actually recorded performing, but apparently he could hang in the air for like 9 seconds, which I'm not sure
about
I believe, but yeah.
There's this legendary sort of aspect about how long you're in the air for.
The other thing with Matthew Ball and his jumps is he lands so lightly because
you're really obsessed with how light people land, aren't you?
It's a big issue. You don't want to hear people thudding around. It takes away from the grace of it. If you think about the acoustics in the Royal Opera House, it's hard to be quiet because they're designed for opera. So they're designed that you can be like whispering on stage and everyone can hear it. So you need to like not... I don't mind pointe tapping because you can't avoid that. But you need to not be like thud.
Hermione has a funny story about an interaction with Matthew Ball. Hermione is one of those people that used to wait at the stage door.
Used to.
I've never done it actually, and I kind of want to do it.
We should do it sometime. When I was a teenager, I used to wait at the stage door a fair amount, and I was lucky enough to see Matthew Ball debut in Sleeping Beauty, which I think he's so good in that role, actually. And I went to wait at the stage door, and during the performance, bless him, he'd run on for his really big entrance in the third act. Listen to our previous episode for more. And he'd slipped. Like, he wasn't actually doing any difficult choreography. I think literally just running, he had slipped on the stage. He said later, it was a bit of tape he'd slipped on. And when a dancer stumbles...
Did he fully fall over? Or
he
did he
fully, fell on his butt
fully.
and then had to stand up.
Oh,
and when a dancer falls, everyone's so scared they're going to get injured, even if it's just a little slip. So the whole audience went, which must be awful for the dancer.
Yeah,
it must be really awful. I saw him at the stage door that night, and he mentioned that he didn't say this to me, by the way, I just overheard this. I just said, oh, you're really great. Can you sign my programme? Oh my God, I'm such a big fan. I was a kid. He said that he slipped on the tape and he felt a bit annoyed about it because he wasn't doing anything difficult. A week later, I booked tickets to see them again. I think I bought them off someone who couldn't go to the performance. I loved that him, and it was Yasmin Nagdi who was also dancing with. I loved them so much. I was like, I have to see them again immediately. So I booked to see them again a week later. And I went back and I thought he was even better in the role. I thought he'd really grown into it. I think sometimes I like seeing a debut, but sometimes when you see a debut, they're a bit nervous, especially when they're younger. I think
neither of the debuts that we saw
were nervous at all. Not at all. And so I went to the stage door again, and I said to him, oh, you were even better tonight than you were the last time I saw you.
Which I just love, because basically Hermione went up to Matthew Ball and said, you were terrible last time, you were really good this time.
No, I wasn't. And he was like, yeah, I felt better, because he was a nice gentleman. And I said, I thought about how to say, I think you've grown into the role. And so rather than saying you were better than you were last week, I said, you were even better.
There you go, yeah.
I tried to be polite about it. I hope he doesn't hate me. He does not remember who I am.
The funny thing is, so I think a quick recommendation from us both is there's a really great documentary called Men at the Barre, which first came out on the BBC.
That's Barre as in ballet bar.
Barre.
Yeah,
yes.
double R.
And it's about male ballet dancers, and it's really interesting if you're at all interested in that kind of thing. It's probably on YouTube, I think.
Yeah,
if it is, I'll put it in the show notes.
BBC iPlayer.
It may also
for our UK listeners.
I'll put it in the show notes. But it's funny because when I originally watched that documentary, he tells a story of people waiting at the stage door and reviewing his performance, which just reminded me of you.
Upcoming
performances. So Woolf Works is still running currently. I believe there are still tickets out there. We stress again, if you are between the ages of 16 and 25, sign up on the Royal Opera House website to become a young member, and you will have access to £25 tickets. And they sometimes do.
And wear your correct contact lenses if you're going to sit in a really good seat.
They sometimes do specific sales for young people where you can get great tickets anywhere in the house for £25, so definitely take advantage of that. The Royal Ballet is about to start their run of Cinderella, which they are...
Which is such an important ballet for Kat's life.
It is. It was the first ballet that I ever saw when I was 4 years old.
And I've never seen it.
Yeah, they haven't staged it for 10 years.
They have not.
And it is going to be a new staging, so new sets, new costumes, but the same choreography by Frederick Ashton.
Who is a very prolific figure in British ballet.
Yes. Lots of studios named after him around the world.
He was the artistic director of the Royal Ballet in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah. We'll talk more about Cinderella in another episode when possibly we've seen it. But that is definitely something worth booking at the moment. And there's something else that's upcoming, is they are going to be live streaming that into cinemas on the 12th of April and on the 16th of April. So you can find screenings for that all around the country. So definitely take advantage of that. Go and see it. Oh, we want to say thank you so much to everybody that listened to our previous episode, our first episode. We really appreciate the support and hopefully continued support of our endeavours to share ballet with the world.
Also, if you want to see our faces and some behind the scenes pictures and other craziness, then go follow us on Instagram at @SeeThePointe.
We are now both incredibly tired.
Thank you for listening.
Talking for so long. Thank you for listening.
I'm going to go charity shopping.
Yeah.
Bye.
Goodbye.